So welcome to the very first installment of the Schlock Files. Somehow you've got lost on the internet and you've got sucked up into this weird vortex. I'm your host, John the host. For the very first episode, we had to pull someone extremely fun for a movie like this, and who better to pull than a CEO of a toy company, of KessCo, Mr. Alex Kessler. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to the first episode of the Schlock Files.
Hey, awesome. Really stoked to talk about all that is Twister.
Why did we settle on Twister as the maiden voyage of this series?
I mean, you can tell me why it was the maiden voyage. Know that I wanted to talk about Twister just because it recently came up during the time that is COVID 2020. Just as a kid, I was obsessed with disaster movies and disasters. My parents eventually got divorced, and then during that process moved to Los Angeles, and this was in '93. My house 2 days before we moved out and moved to Los Angeles got hit by a tornado.
Oh, what?
And the house itself wasn't, but the entire forest, trees were ripped out. I have distinct memories of my parents passing 5-year-old me and 2-year-old my sister over these trees the size of my apartment building because we lived in the forest in Ohio, because it was decimated by a tornado. So then that began, and then literally we moved to Los Angeles in '93, end of '93, and the '94 earthquake happened within 6 months of us moving there. So
disaster movies.
Growing up, I was obsessed. Twister, Dante's Peak, Volcano, Deep Impact, Independence Day. If there was a movie being destroyed by a natural or science fiction disaster, I was all on board.
Jeez. Well, first off, this series, what it is it's the exact opposite of what the Cult of Films is. We are talking about films with huge budgets, probably big, exciting films that maybe the critics kind of ripped apart. But you know what? They have special places in my eyes, or my guest eyes as well. So yeah, like you said, let's go back to 1996, because in the mid-90s, this is exactly when the disaster movie kind of birthed. This year, actually, in Twister, and this very same year, Independence Day came out. It actually lost an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects to Independence Day. And that wasn't the only, Roland Emmerich and John De Bont rivalry that would come to be. More on that later. But if you think about it, Alex, the disaster film of the mid-90s was really the MCU of the 2000s and the 2010s.
Absolutely. Special effects were just far enough that you could make a tornado or fire from a volcano, and you just had to shake your camera to make an earthquake happen. So they were big enough events that you could accomplish them without having to do the same level of you don't need Iron Man wouldn't have been possible in the 90s, right? You can see what early CGI looks like. It's not really that great, but you can make a volcano, you can make a tornado. It's just a cow flying off in the distance.
We got cows. Before we get too much into it, hashtag not a sponsor, but I have a tornado-themed beer. It's called Ride the Spiral. So a couple of these are an 8% double IPA. It's a pineapple orange double IPA from Silver City Brewing right up here in Seattle, Washington. I will salute to your health. So l'chaim, sir.
Thank you. I have a Porg cup that I use as a cup holder. So that'll be my my drink for this evening.
Let's kind of scale it back to John De Bont. So who's John De Bont? This man is the craziest fucking dude in Hollywood. And how do I know that? It goes all the way back to the early 70s. And he was the DP on a little known film called Roar. And what Roar was it was the producer of The Exorcist and his wife, the mother of Melanie Griffith. Anyways, they decided to purchase all these lions and have them live in their house. And so they decided to make a movie about it, and they had 150 lions, and on the box art for Roar, it says no animals were harmed in the making of this film, but 70 crew members were.
Roar! But you look at cats. The cat's got a little extra. Yeah, that's all. Oh.
Why if you bring us here, we're just gonna die.
Roar!
And it was that was when Melanie Griffith had a lion clawed her face. She had to have reconstructive surgery. All these things happened, and John De Bont, who was a young cinematographer only at the time, actually got scalped by a lion during the filming of Roar. He was back on the set filming in 2 weeks afterwards. So that's just a little bit of context into the Dutch filmmaker John De Bont.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is a guy who, like, none of his movies I would argue are good. Well, I would argue, like, Speed is up there maybe for, like, perfect, like, movies in some way.
Perfect time, perfect, yeah.
Like, kind of like Die Hard, similar, like, you know, and it was the era also of, like, everything is Die Hard.
He was the cinematographer on Die Hard, actually.
Yeah, he was. And, like, I started doing cinematography, and then he did Speed, into Twister, into Speed 2, into The Haunting, into Laura Croft. And those are his 5 directing credits. and then just produces a bunch of bangers like Minority Report, SLC Punk, Equilibrium. Like, these are movies that are all like, he has a vibe. Is what I'm gonna say.
Yes, definite vibe, and Twister had a definite vibe, and his style of filmmaking would translate like all those years afterwards. It was the same type of environment was on Twister, because you had like Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt. They had to like take a couple weeks off and push back filming because the lights that were so bright that lit the night sky behind them actually burned their retinas. A bunch of crew members, like you could see that scene where Aunt Meg's house like kind of goes down. It was all on hydraulics. Well, you know, one of the crew people were stuck in there and got seriously wounded. There was like 20 people after like the first couple weeks of shooting Twister that quit on John De Bont because everyone just thought he was insane.
It's cool / terrifying how dangerous it must have been to be around him in the mid to early 90s.
What would you say kind of kicked off the disaster movie? Would you say it was kind of like Jurassic Park? And then, because, you know, you look at a movie like Twister, even though it's more of like a natural disaster, you still have to think if Jurassic Park didn't happen in the way it happened, these type of films probably wouldn't have been around.
I think Jurassic Park obviously reinvented special effects, and they brought together the 12 like different storylines that are disconnected, all eventually become connected around this disaster. And then it was dinosaurs eating people. This comes off like the world got sick of Die Hard, the movie, right? Like Die Hard happened in 1988, and then you go into this like 5-year period where every movie is Die Hard. You have Speed, Die Hard on a bus. You have
True Lies.
You have like and so even Home Alone is technically Die Hard with a kid.
Last Action Hero. Yeah, the list goes on.
And so that kind of action style was falling by the wayside. Special effects finally got to the point where you could do really big, lambastic things. CGI could actually do stuff. Like before Jurassic Park, like CGI was the Terminator in T2. Liquids could be done where you could do that, or the Abyss, or you had young Merlin or something that had the like stained glass window, a monster that they fight. But before that, everything was more claymation. Practical effects, and so this was kind of the first era where special effects could do something like make a tornado on a computer, or do something like create the destruction of downtown Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and New York City. And so between Twister, which was literally directly like this movie exists because Jurassic Park exists, right? Like Michael Crichton is the writer of this movie. He wrote this movie. The reason it got made is through his kind of establishment through the movies he was making, which are these like hard science thriller action stories. And then at the same time, Independence Day happens that same year and does the sci-fi side of that. And then between those two movies, you get Armageddon, you get Deep Impact, you get Dante's Peak and Volcano.
And you get all the Emmerich films, like the 2012s and all that.
Which kind of and that kind of is what ended it, right? Like it was there until 2012, because Day After Tomorrow was also a very successful movie.
Right, yeah.
And that goes all the way through the 2000s. And then kind of the end of the 2000s is when superhero movies started. Like 2001 is when because the 90s had a hard disaster movie moment. Then the 2000s started superhero movies. There was that like almost the Bronze Age of superhero movies that had Spider-Man, X-Men,
Blade.
But then Daredevil, and like it got bad, right? Like there was like 3 good ones, and then they started just not understanding what was good about these, and people that didn't really care. And then Marvel brought it back, and that's kind of been the next step, right? We're now in the era of superhero movies versus the era of disaster versus the era of Die Hard versus the era of Star Wars knockoffs, and before that was Cowboy, right? Like it's cyclical where you go through these eras. Correct. And Twister I think was Jurassic Park was kind of the beginning of this. I do think, and then Twister and Independence Day were kind of the tentpole moment for it.
And it wasn't just Michael Crichton that had the same connection from Jurassic Park to Twister, but your favorite filmmaker of all time, Steven Spielberg, was the producer of Twister as well.
Right. And that's kind of like Spielberg heralded this era, right? That he created this kind of special effects boom just with the technology. Like George Lucas did it with Star Wars, right? With practical effects, and then Steven Spielberg did it again with CGI and Jurassic Park. So Michael Crichton's this writer that is interesting. He kind of was one of the best. I think he's is the best, if not the best, science fiction, like hard science fiction writer of all time. He's up there and creates like tons of books that become the movies. Like he did the Andromeda Strain. That's how he got started. But he did Jurassic Park. He did Congo. He did Twister. Like Twister is one of the movies that he wrote that wasn't a book. He's also the creator of ER, the show. You know, he's this like kind of writer that created all these like science fiction, but like science if it could really happen. Because before that, science fiction was mostly science fiction fantasy, right? Where it's
grounded.
This is like, if this technology was a step better, what happens and what does that science do? In Jurassic Park, it was, can cloning dinosaurs happen? In Twister, it's just like, it's not even that, right? It's just like looking at science and making it a thriller. He kind of made fiction of science versus what magical thing can we explain with science while like winking at the camera, like Star Trek or Star Wars or even Terminator, right? Time travel. And when Michael Crichton did time travel with Timeline, movie's terrible, book is really good. There's much more of like, he deals with like the actual technology at that point of what they think the most likely way to time travel is. You use like basically faxing technology, where when you fax someone, technically you're not that document, or when you fax something, that document's not traveling, you're just copying it. And so then you destroy the first copy, and like how that process would work and what that does to a person who time travels through that method and walks through it, which I thought was always really, really fascinating. And he's, you know, he has passed away at this point. I think he definitely kind of heralded this era as well. Like, I think he was a big part of this disaster movie era just existing.
You know, just scaling back to Twister itself, the movie, it was rough getting off the ground, no pun intended. I mean, they had other filmmakers attached to it. They had other writers. They had a bunch of rewriters. Like, Joss Whedon, of all people, was brought in to rewrite until he got bronchitis, and then Steven Zalian came in to kind of help out until Joss Whedon could come back in and kind of punch it up as well. This thing was just kind of riddled with it, because at the time, John De Bont was focused on Godzilla, or, you know, to the kids, Zilla, until he couldn't get the funding that he wanted for that film. So then he kind of abandoned that, went all in on Twister, and that's when Roland Emmerich, again, I told you I'd kind of, you know, connect that loop. Roland Emmerich kind of picked up the pieces, made Godzilla, for better or worse, depending on who you talk to. 99% of the people out there would say for worse. Maybe not Matthew Broderick. He said he had a good time on that film, but everyone else, not so much.
Good time on a film versus having a good are not generally related.
Exactly.
It can't be, but it's not. You can have a good time on a film and it be a bad movie.
Right, yeah, exactly. And this wasn't just, I mean, yes, first and foremost, this is a disaster movie, and it should be coined as that. But I feel like this was kind of the dawn of the extreme rom-com also. This was also kind of a before Titanic was Titanic. So there was that, it was the studios kind of pandering towards both members of the couple, just like, oh, you know, it's about, you know, tornadoes, and there's destruction, there's big special effects, but you also have Helen Hunt from Mad About You.
I don't know if I agree that this started that, right? Like, I think that's inherent to movie history. Like, you know, Die Hard even has the only other really character. There's like two characters that matter in Die Hard after three, and one of them is his wife. But beyond that, I think the thing that's almost more interesting about this movie and this era in regards to the relationship between the characters, is the divorce angle. I think the world was obsessed with the divorce in the 90s. Like, this movie came out right around Mrs. Doubtfire. Even Jurassic Park, the reason the kids are there is because their parents are having a divorce and they needed to get rid of them while they're going through that process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, like, the fact that, like, the main crux of this relationship is that they broke up. He's back purely to get his divorce papers signed so that his new fiance and him can go get married. And then he just happens to show up at the moment that the technology that he invented, Dorothy, is finally up and running and ready to go right in the middle of tornado season. And so he has a chance to get in at that last moment, and then falls in love with the game, falls back in love with his wife, and his fiance leaves.
Has there been more of a toxic couple in a romantic setting? Like this, they are just horrible for each other. The only thing that they have in common is just like near-death experiences and adrenaline. So obviously, when that wears off, I don't know if these kids are gonna make it.
Yeah, she comes in. Oh, you mean Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton?
Yeah, just their whole relationship.
Because I think what's interesting is his fiance comes from like a long line of movies painting new significant others in a bad light when they've done nothing wrong, but because they just are like the weird fiance. Like a good one is actually also in this movie, Carrie Elway's in Liar Liar.
Big rubber band around it. It'll be great. Hey, great gift, Dad. Thanks, son.
Is another example where it's just
scared of the claw.
Nicest guy.
Yeah.
That's just trying to connect with his like the amount of like stepdads who don't want anything to do with the kid is a long list. The fact that this kid is like guys willing to try and make this kid like him is a lot of credit. And he but he's painted as the bad guy, right? He's not Jim Carrey. And she's not Helen Hunt. And I think it's one of those like when the relationship is going well is when science is working, right? Is almost how it's painted in this movie. I would imagine that when they're not chasing tornadoes is when kind of their problems come back, and maybe Bill Paxton is making a mistake here, but also I think she has a lot of deep-seated trauma. Like her father was murdered by a tornado in front of her, to the extent that she's designated her life towards hunting down tornadoes and defeating them. Like literally.
Yeah.
It's interesting just like this era in relationship dynamics of going through divorces, not going through divorces. How does that end up? What does that look like? How does that affect a storyline versus like previous movies where it would be much more of just like a classic, they fall in love, they never met each other, he's maybe this new person and their romantic relationship. I do like in this movie the agency differences that they have versus in other ones where classically in film, he would be just this strapping hero that would defeat the tornado, and then she's kind of part of the reward system that would go there.
Very flawed.
And the fact that they're both flawed, they're both the main characters of this movie. Like they both have. She's really the lead, right? Like she is the lead of this. Bill Paxton is second to her. And I think the cast is also really interesting, right? You have Carrie Elway's and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Alan Ruck all just kind of like doing great. Carrie Elway's, I mean, like, what's interesting about this whole thing is Carrie Elway's is another like weird villain because his great sin is getting funding to stop.
He's got corporate sponsorship. He deserves to die in a tornado.
Right. I guess like it's kind of hating maybe during this era, like this was the beginning of like the cable network TV show where like these like camera crews would follow these people to show them like this is tornado hunters, which like ironically the show created probably more versions of that type of show before.
It was the Zach Baggins of tornado hunting of the time, for sure.
And it's just like, well, he's still trying to stop tornadoes from murdering people. Like all of
They even try to like dork up Carrie Elway's. I always said Carrie Ewell's, but we'll go with Elway's because that's probably correct. But he's just so likable. Like people just can't get him from Princess Bride out of your skull. And so like even when he's in the dorky wannabe stepdad and Liar Liar or this, he's just so great, and he kind of like chews up the scenery in everything. He even makes like Saw borderline watchable, and I hate that film. But he is absolutely fantastic in this. But as far as the cast goes, because that's a good segue, because I definitely want to focus on the cast a bit. In this film in the 90s, usually the main role would have gone to someone like a Kevin Costner. And I am so glad that didn't happen, because I think that if any other like especially popular in the 90s actor were to play Billy in this, I don't think I would have liked it. Or at least as much, right? Like it's just Bill Paxton. He had his time to shine. He always plays that in the background, like third or fourth or even fifth build character, the support comic relief. And to see him to have a little bit of diversity and agency in this film was a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, like how many movies can you name where Bill Paxton is the lead?
Zero? I mean, Twister?
Yeah, you want like to give it to Helen Hunt, which like fair.
Yeah, for sure.
She is top billed, but like, yeah, like really that is more often he is, and to the extent that I think for years I didn't think this was the same, especially because there's Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton. I just always this was like a third Bill. And or maybe it was like Adam Baldwin, who also kind of just looks like Bill Paxton, and like Bill Paxton when Bill Paxton hit his 40s, roles, and just like didn't realize that this was Bill Paxton until I like got into high school and like rewatched Twister. I was like, oh,
right, yeah.
Oh, he's not he's not saying game over. He's saying defeat this tornado.
It's funny. I love the stakes in this film, because in a normal disaster movie, like even that same year, like Independence Day, it's we have to kill the aliens, we have to figure out how to stop this thing from happening, we have to survive, we have to do this. And this was a nice flip on that. They can't stop tornadoes. They're literally just risking, this group of people is just risking their lives for an extra 10 minutes of warning time.
Yep.
And that's great. I think that it kind of the message gets muddled a little bit. Like there's that scene where Helen Hunt's in the ambulance with her Aunt Meg once the tornado destroys her house, and Aunt Meg kind of looks up at her and she's like, "It's time you have to go do this. It's time to end this." And I'm like, wait, no. You know, like that's not what this movie's about. You can't. That's there's no shark that we're taking down or blowing up. It's literally just putting these little sensors in the thing so we could study it later.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it is I think like they try like giving some amount of timing where it's like, oh, their funding is going to go away, or this is Bill Paxton's last go, and they're not going to be able to do it without both of them because he knows how the machine works because he invented it, and he even does it, right? They come up with the Coca-Cola can propeller on each one that like is the game changer on the whole thing, and so there's definitely less of like, this needs to happen right now. The agency, though, is that when you're in this part of the world, the Midwest, and you're actively looking for tornadoes, they can just get you. Mm-hmm. They can show up. You like there is almost no warning, especially in this point in time where they didn't have this technology being used. So like, finding tornadoes was difficult, like, because you don't know where they're going to be. You just know the time of year and the general third of the United States where they show up, and then you have to get in front of them, putting your life in danger to like try and get equipment into them, because there is a time window. And I thought it was really cool. The other thing I really like about this movie is just like all of the sciencey term, like not this, like all of the slang, the tornado hunter slang, which does that exist? Is that real? They make it up. Like how much research was done? And like, oh yeah, we got side twisters and we got a level. I know like the levels exist, right? That's a real. That's like a terminology you just know as a person. Mm-hmm. Because level 5, like same as I know what a level 5 hurricane is and a level 4 hurrane is, and I know what 7.3 earthquake is.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so like we like to rate natural disasters on a scale, but the like just pretty much everything that Philip Seymour Hoffman says in this movie, I feel like it's just like kind of not real, but maybe.
Yeah, he was put there as the comic relief. This was a very Jack Black-esque role, but that's the type of role Philip Seymour Hoffman had in the beginning of his career, even as late as like what is it, like Along Came Polly?
Rain dance. Let it rain.
As like the Yuck guy. That was, I think he really turned his career around in like from like Boogie Nights on, into Magnolia, kind of like Paul Thomas Anderson transformed him into a more serious actor, or at least being taken seriously in those type of roles. But yeah, I mean, he was great in this. It was like, it was almost weird and jarring to me because I used to watch this movie all the time, but I was rewatching it yesterday and I was just like, oh shit, that's Philip Seymour Hoffman doing the Yuck role that he used to be so known for.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's an argument to be made, and maybe I'm saying blasphemy, that like if Jack Black could learn to tone it down.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah.
Jack Black could play every role that Philip Seymour Hoffman has ever been in, and like go into that role seamlessly, right? Like they have such a similar, and I think Philip Seymour Hoffman could probably just kill would have been able to kill without even blinking most roles that Jack Black is in, other than the fact that Philip Seymour Hoffman probably can't sing like Jack Black, and Jack Black can't tone it down like Philip Seymour Hoffman can.
Fair.
But
Yeah.
they're very similar actors and both very talented, so I think they could probably fit into a lot of places.
Totally agree with you, and you know, murder us in the comments, whatever, but yeah, I think that Jack Black has that seriousness about him, and hopefully maybe, you know, now that he's getting a little bit more gray in the beard and a little bit more long in the tooth, maybe we'll see a transformation.
Maybe, I don't know. Especially like he's on TikTok, so you can follow Jack Black on TikTok. I think
as long as you could follow anyone on TikTok, right?
I don't think he wants to. I think he likes his life. If I was Jack Black, I would love my life. Jack Black's life sounds wonderful. He's got like kids. He gets to be as wacky as he wants to be. Yeah, he just does whatever he wants. He has a band that like I don't. There are not a lot of lives I can imagine that are as like probably as satisfying as Jack Black. And I don't know if he wants an Oscar, right? I don't know if every person needs that. I don't think he needs. I think you can be like, I don't need that. I'm good. I'm just gonna be me. Be great when I'm me.
Let's talk a little bit about what set this film apart from its peers at the time, because it's impossible not to talk about this and put it up against what it lost to in the Oscars, and that's Independence Day. And I think what sets this apart and what this film did right, because I think the dialogue and everything was equally it was borderline cheesy. You had those big speeches and these back and forths, although I did like how they were a little bit more real with their relationship, that was a little bit more relatable. But I feel like, on paper, this film shouldn't have worked. Like it has a redundancy to it that on paper it looks like it would just get boring after a while. Okay, we're going to jump in a car, we're going to go to a tornado. Dorothy 1 didn't work. We're going to jump in a car, we're going to go to a tornado, we're going to argue a bit. Dorothy 2 didn't work, and so on and so forth. But the way, I don't know if it was John De Bont or if it was just you bought into the cast was perfect or whatnot. It just worked, and you're never bored while watching Twister, and I can't say that for even like Titanic or anything else that, like those big movies that came after it.
Well, so I think it works on two levels, and one of them is a pun now, or the word level is going to be used as a pun. It's a video game, right? Like,
oh shit, yeah.
You have 3 lives. You got to fight the boss, and you got to go to each level, and then you go through a level, and maybe you lost a life, but you got through it. Then you go to the next level, and then the next level. It also is a car chase, right? This movie and Speed are not that dissimilar in the sense that this is a car chase. You're chasing after a thing.
Yes.
It's cat and mouse. At one point you get close to the tornado, it disappears. At one point you get close, but you didn't set the system up to be able to catch it, so it's able to outsmart you. Like they give the tornadoes agency, which is why I think this movie works, right? Like you almost feel like these are things that are hunting you, or you're hunting and are able to kind of dodge you.
Which is what the critics gave it shit for too, about the tornadoes having so much personality. The tornadoes in this film have comedic timing.
Where's my truck?
I think we're going in!
They have perfect timing as far as when to wipe out a drive-through, movie screen, like right when Jack Nicholson breaks through the door. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of convenience in this, but it's just like it was meant to shove your face with popcorn and enjoy yourself, and I think it achieved that.
And you want to kind of talk about the lines between this and like Independence Day, right? Like that's and I think what's interesting is it's almost the line between the 80s and the 2000s that are the 90s, right? Independence Day is this big sci-fi blockbuster that has like infinite special effects, huge set pieces, giant stars, where Twister feels more like the 80s kind of action thriller that was what blockbusters were up to that point, right? It's more Lethal Weapon, it's more Die Hard, it's more Speed, it's more, and obviously the directors are influencing these two things, but like it's kind of taking that vibe and grounding it. It's a much more grounded science fiction action movie.
Because that's a Michael Crichton thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what the team behind it was trying to do, right? They're trying to say like this is real, and the disaster movies towed on this line, and almost all of them are one or the other, because the disaster movies are also famous for, other than Twister and Independence Day, almost all of them have a pair. right? Like Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Right.
You have where Deep Impact is the like scientific study of showing how the world would handle an actual meteor coming there.
A lot more bleak.
Is let's shoot a bunch of miners into space, Michael Bay, and have space madness. you have what's the other? Oh, Volcano and Dante's Peak, right? You have like Volcano, which is this ridiculous movie where like a volcano shows up in the middle of Los Angeles, and how does Los Angeles deal with a volcano forming out of the La Brea tar pits? Or you have Dante's Peak, which is like, this is a mountain, this is a volcano, this is what like a small town community, how would they deal with a volcano exploding in the United States northwest? And like, so that was always kind of the deal, whereas like there's one movie that's like, this is the science, this is like a Michael Crichton novel, this is what Jurassic Park did, but with this natural disaster. And then there's the other one, which is, we have infinite money and imagination.
Eat your popcorn.
What's the most insane thing we can do if a meteor is coming to, okay, so we're going to throw astronauts onto it, and we're going to have it hit Earth. So we'll get both.
But as opposed, I mean, this didn't have its knockoffs. I mean, Night of the Tornadoes, starring Devon Sawa. No, but in all seriousness, you could say that this was now everyone's hitting the unsubscribe after this comment. This was the mid '90s Jaws, because this was the science and the popcorn. Yeah,
I think like this feels more like a Jaws, right? Jurassic Park feels more like a Jaws. This is a Spielberg film. I mean, it's the writer of Jurassic Park, the novel that the Jurassic Park was based on. Steven Spielberg produces it, and so it has that similar vibe. That stuff like today, like the most recent movie I think that's comparable is The Martian, right? The Martian feels very Twister, Jurassic Park. Right. This kind of era. One of the reasons I like The Martian was like so much of a hark back to that 90s where you have like 12 different storylines all working to solve a crisis that maybe separately, but that eventually are brought together to save the thing. And in this, it's Carrie Elways plus Bill Paxton plus Helen Hunt plus Helen Hunt's backstory plus all the other people all working to defeat a tornado. In Jurassic Park, it's Malcolm in the lobby with the microphone and Hammond, where the hunter and Ellie are out on the field. You have Grant and the kids out on the other side of the island, and you have Newman, which I'm forgetting his actual name. You have him like stealing the thing, right? You have all these different pieces that are happening in the movie, but all leading towards this moment or going through the end of it. And I think I love that type of movie. That's one of the reasons I love Twister. And just like that genre, I think is great. It's one of the better ways to do an ensemble movie.
It's a smaller group of people dealing with something that affects real people on a day-to-day basis, and I think that's why it was more beloved at the time. And there's not a whole lot of reviews out there, but there is a lot of, like CinemaSins just like destroys this thing, or there is like. Critics didn't like it. Like it was at one point they're just like the tornado roars. I'm just like, yeah, well, watch Jaws 3. It's just like, so what? It's
got a 6.4. It was very successful. It made a ton of money.
Yeah.
It also like, I don't prescribe to the CinemaSins. In fact, I like call CinemaSins out. I like hate that version of movie watching where you're like nitpicking every little thing, and it's like, come on, enjoy the movie. There are like, and they do it right. You can go to CinemaSins and they do Star Wars. They do classic films where you just like, this is a slog. You're making this movie like boring. I'm a bigger fan if I were to choose like the honest trailer side of things, which I do think did a Twister thing either this summer or last summer, because they do like summer blockbusters that they like didn't exist before to do, and. They're at least they understand that this is tongue in cheek, right? They understand that, like this movie was meant to be enjoyed. It's a time of its era. It does things that most movies nowadays are more boring and don't do. Like it actually thinks about what it's showing you. The science behind it, for all intents and purposes, is as real as you could portray on in film and not have it be extraordinarily boring.
Right. Yeah. Because they have the science guy explanation, then they have the layman's term explanation guy. And that's what you need in movies like this. And I think they executed it fine. Because if it was too science-y, people would have turned their brain off and just like, where's the tornado? Was it going to pick up the truck and the cow yet? And it's just like, yeah, hold on, give it a second. It had a little bit for everyone. And it wasn't so so dumb that just like it didn't pander to the lowest common denominator. It had something for everyone, for every moviegoer, and I think that's why it still holds up. Like like I said, I watched it last night, and I've done a lot of these, like especially on the Cult of Films, where I'm just like, oh God, I had so much affection for this film back in the day when I was younger or whatnot, and then I watched it, and I'm just like, wow, this was not the same experience I had. I thought this was a sure thing, and watching Twister, I could honestly say that I still had a great time with this so many years later.
All the characters have great chemistry, right? Like they like hate each other, but like you feel why they got divorced, right? Like, I get it.
They sell it. They sell that the passion.
Yeah, like they're extremely watchable. Like you have. It doesn't date itself. Like one of the reasons I think these disaster movies are a little bit more fondly remembered than stuff like Lost in Space.
So my quarters are yours.
Why don't you just hang on to your joystick?
The CGI in Lost in Space actually makes it unwatchable, right? They like reached too far for what was capable at that time with the technology available, and like this movie, like tornadoes look fine. Like it's not that complicated of effect. I currently can make a TikTok with a tornado or a video on YouTube with a tornado that looks realistic on it. That's not hard.
Sure.
So this technology like didn't age badly. The story is good. Like you feel it's a good car chase thing. There's like cheese in it, but like there's cheese. Like the movies I like are the ones that have some cheese, I guess. I don't need
in the 90s. What do you want? Yeah.
Right. And it's like, it's not as bad as other movies. Like it's not like they're not hucking it up. It's not even like on an MCU level where there's quips all the time. It's just is like they are having a good time with this adventure tornado hunting movie. Yeah, I don't know. I've always like loved this movie. I mean, part of it is obviously like, as I said, this is a movie about divorce and tornadoes in natural disaster era, and I literally lived through a tornado during a divorce at the age of 5. So
this was tailor-made for you.
I was like, oh, this is me.
From one of your favorite authors, as produced from one of your favorite filmmakers of all time. This is the Alex Kessler of film.
And like, there's an argument that this was led into that, right? Like, Jurassic and Twister was Michael Crichton. I guess I'll read all of his books.
Yeah.
I was 1990. I was 8 when this movie came out. So, formidable Alex Kessler life movie, Twister and Jurassic Park. Actually, and honestly, I recommend people go watch Speed. That movie actually holds up way better than I thought it was. It's like extremely 90s.
Sure.
It's extremely 90s, but it
holds up the same way as like Point Break holds up.
Yes. I have issues. So my wife will watch movies that I'm like, oh, I love this movie, we should watch it. But if it's not good anymore, she'll just be like, I'm done. I can't. We need to stop. I'm sorry. This movie did not age for you in the way that you did.
That's totally fair.
She was like, this movie's great. Like every part of this movie is on fire. It's firing on all cylinders. And Twister is a similar kind of like both of them, which is like, it's sad that he went from these two movies to just like
nothing.
Well, not nothing, just bad action movies. Did he die?
No, he's still around and kicking. Hey, I will always argue, and you actually might see The Haunting on this very series because I have an affection for that movie because I starred as the Owen Wilson character in a school play of The Haunting.
Wow, I sort of got screwed on the old bedroom selection. Every room's like 4 times as big as mine.
More on that later. But, however, we will have to wrap this one up. This was a hell of a maiden voyage for the Schlock Files. I want to thank my special guest co-host, Mr. Alex Kessler. You look into that camera, sir. You tell everyone what you're up to and where to find you.
I have a toy company. You can go buy toys. We actually, the coolest thing is we launched a game called Battle Bosses on Kickstarter, and it launches this fall. So if you can actually pre-order it right now at kess.co/shop. It's about you are getting these collectible action figures that then come with cool cards and dice, and they all battle each other. There's all tropes. So we have mechs and Cthulhu's in it, and samurai, a dragon samurai goddess is in it, and you have mad scientists that have enlarged. They're all meant to be giant building-sized, skyscraper-sized monsters fighting each other. So definitely please check that out at kess.co/shop. You can also see all the other stuff that my toy company does, hula hoops, balls, all that cool stuff. And then if you do like Magic the Gathering, I host the MN Cast, the Masters of Modern podcast. We do modern, but really just non-rotating format content about magic. Every Friday we release kind of YouTube video. We are a podcast format as well, and then we do Commander streams every Monday on my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/KessWiley. You can see it right there, KessWiley everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Discord. If you look at KessWiley, you'll find me.
See EDH streaming as well as some Battle Boss streaming on the MMCast YouTube.
Yeah. So last weekend was Gen Con online weekend. We are living in the times of COVID, so there are no actual shows. But for that, we did like live streamings of Battle Bosses as kind of the launch off of the marketing strategy for the game launch that's happening this fall. And then we do CDH, EDH. Ben, my co-host, like has not classically wanted to play Commander or to it, and
it was a meme actually for a while almost.
But we got him to play Commander CDH, and he's obsessed. Now to the extent that he Thassa's Oracle comboed with Dark Petition in the casual Commander game we did last night. Because he can't help himself now. So he's jumping to the format pretty positively. So it's cool. We're definitely check out the stream as well.
Very good stuff. If you want to follow this podcast right here or the video, I mean, obviously you're watching this, so go ahead and give us a thumbs up downstairs. Subscribe to the channel because this is the home of not only the Schlock Files, but also the Cult of Films and Film Hooligans filmmaker talk with our mutual friend Alex, Mr. Jason Alt. The Michael Bay episode is finally coming out. We've teased that one for months. But go ahead and give us a follow downstairs. Post most of the Schlock Files content and like video posts from the Cult of Films Twitter handle. So go ahead and follow that. That's at the Cult of Films, all undercase. But until next time, Alex, do we have any like cool Twister outs?
I can take off my headphones and just start spinning.
Woo! We'll see you next time.